afternoon, comrades. How are we? After a lot of fun next. You alright? Yeah. Excellent. My name's Brett Clarkson, I work for Unite, and alongside me is one of our members, and who is a fabulous campaigner for people who are forced to claim universal credit through circumstances which are quite often not their own making. So we're going to talk a little bit about what's happening now, but also explaining to what happened 8 years ago. So I'm going to pass you over time. Your name is can not me to finish off all you a Right, Andy, over to you, my friend.
I'm not sure if this is the good bit, but we'll have to wait and see. Okay, over the last couple of years, we've seen more and more workers out on strike picketing for better wages and conditions. The wages of millions of people today are pitiful, and the stories we hear can be heartbreaking. But this is nothing new. The story of the Tolpuddle markets and their families show us. Back then, the labourers in Tolpuddle lived in meagre poverty on just a few shillings a week. When they asked for an increase, their wages were cut. If there's something similar today, we call it fire and rehire. When the 6 Tolpuddle martyrs dared to form a union, they were arrested and eventually deported. Instead of Rwanda, they were transported to Australia, leaving their families without income and destitute. Today, millions of families try to survive through universal credit. But back then, the families sought help from parish relief. Unfortunately for them, the same people who arrested their husbands were responsible for the relief and refused to pay them anything. This just goes to show, or to demonstrate, that in this country there is a long history of threatening to withhold social security to discipline and punish hard-working people. With their husbands torn from their sides, branded common criminals and transported overseas, the magistrates sought to make an example of the women and children to deter anyone else from taking illegal oaths and joining a trade union. The magistrates wanted them to feel the heavy hand of the law for the heinous crime of being married or related to these men. However, to the frustration of the government and justices, the trade union stepped in to not only provide money throughout, but also advice and guidance along the fraternal regard. It may seem like a million miles away to connect our campaign on inward conditionality with that of the martyrs, but I think in some respects our campaign continues that tradition of support and fraternity. The people we are campaigning about claim universal credit due to low wages, caring responsibilities, or long-term sickness or disability. The majority of women. These people are not being threatened with deportation, but they are being pushed into a system of behavioural conditionality underpinned by benefit sanctions that we know can have a profoundly negative personal, financial and health impact. Imagine, if you will, what it must feel like to live 24/7 under the threat of being punished for the crime of being 10 minutes late for an appointment, or not precisely following the instruction from a job centre work page. This is the reality for not just the unemployed, but over 1 million people on low pay, part-time and often insecure work. Our draconian social security system can make a person vulnerable. It can trigger debt, rent arrears, food bank use, and can ultimately result in some people becoming homeless, destitute, or even suicidal. We also know people have died. Our government knows that conditionality is causing harm, but they refuse to listen to reason, preferring instead to dig in their heels and ignore the vast amount of evidence. This is something they have in common with the Whigs, who knew that what had happened to those labourers was an injustice, but let their hatred of trade unions cloud their judgment, despite 800,000 people signing petitions calling on their release. Politicians today, in an attempt to appear tough to voters, have extended and intensified conditionality to such an extent that it has created a second status of worker that disempowers claimants and propels them towards inadequate pay, insecurity, poor employment terms, and prevents work-life balance. Universal credit rules means they will not be able to enjoy the same basic employment rights as other workers. Now, it's not all bad news. There is always hope in struggle. Despite reluctance to liberate them, the martyrs did eventually come home, and they were reunited with their families. And after celebrating their return, the trade unions helped them to move on with their lives. Now, I'm going to pass over to Brett, who will tell you a bit more about our campaign and what we're trying to do to bring an end to in-work conditionality.
Yes, guys, so social security is a trade issue for all of us. In July, in a field just a couple hundred yards away, trying not to get blown away in the wind and the rain, before the Tolpuddle March Festival was cancelled last year. I got the news that the Elect Policy Conference passed a motion. And that motion called on the United campaign against sanctions and in-work conditionality and conditionality for all claimants. And since then, Andy and I have been really busy. We've been asked to carry out that campaign, So there's lots of materials we've put forward, and you can get some of these today. They're on the table there. Please look at the postcards. Please sign them and give us back to us. We're going to take them onto the Secretary of State. We've spoken to academics, we've spoken to employers, we've spoken to other trade unions, we've spoken to politicians, we've graduated off the street. In fact, you name them, we've spoken to them. In fact, we've done presentations now to around 1,000 United Ranks, telling them about what's going on. And probably around 1,300 or 1,400 in total. That's including people from other unions, politicians, and we've produced films. Monday last week, we spoke in Cardiff to a group of disabled campaigners to explain why the issue is important to disabled people. Why it's important to women. These conditionality changes will bring 1.7 million people into the sanction regime. These people are in work. 77% of those women. In some sectors, it's up to 90%. It's really, really important issue. And it's a situation which is bound to fail. How can you have people who are working have to attend a job centre to meet with a job coach while they're in work? You know, it baffles me. It baffles employers when you tell them about this. Now, no employer groups were consulted, trade unions were consulted. These changes were basically slipped out during budget statements, so no one would know this. These are going to have catastrophic effects for working people, and it's been extended even further, so we're now looking at possibly at 2 million workers in this country being under conditionality. That means if they don't comply by the rules that the Department of Work and Pensions say they have to comply by, they will be sanctioned. The sanction is £85 a week, and the average sanction is estimated to be 11 to 12 weeks. Now, I don't know anybody who could afford to lose £900+, let alone the most poorest in society. So that's what our campaign is about. We're trying to stop that. We're in Parliament again on Tuesday. We're engaging with the wider trade union movement, so we'll have a presence at the CUC Women's Conference during the Fringe. On that, it won't be me. It will be one of my female colleagues who be pleased to hear. But we're also taking this to the United Nations. We're putting as much effort as we can. We believe we can win this campaign because it's just completely not working. So I'm going to leave it there. I know we're running late, so I'm not going to ask the questions, but if anyone does have any questions about the campaign, and then I will be around, please just approach us. Just approach us, and we'll answer as many questions as we can afterwards. Okay, thank you guys.